games from Squid Game aren't just fiction. They're happening right now. And if you've been watching Squid Game 2, there's a chance you've already been targeted.
That's what the man told me. At first I thought it was some kind of joke, something he said to mess with me, or at worst, to sell me some kind of underground merchandise. You know how it is. These viral shows come out and everyone tries to cash in. I didn't think much of it. I was sitting on the cold, hard bench in the subway station, waiting for the last train home. It was late, past midnight, and I was dead tired after a long day at work. He slid onto the bench next to me so quietly that I didn't even notice at first. The man looked ordinary enough, maybe in his late 30s, wearing a clean gray coat and carrying a briefcase. The type of guy you wouldn't look twice at on a crowded street. He smiled at me, polite but a little too wide.
Do you have a minute to play a game?
I laughed, more out of exhaustion than amusement. I was half asleep, barely coherent. What, like a prank or something?
Not a prank, it's real.
He set his briefcase down and opened it slightly. Inside, I saw the familiar red and blue Dokji tiles. It took me a second to recognize them from Squid Game, but when I did, I couldn't help but smile.
You've seen it, haven't you?
Yeah, man, everybody has. Great show. What's this about? I asked, nodding toward the Dokji. I was starting to think this was just some hardcore fan trying to recreate the game for fun. He leaned closer.
The games aren't just a show, they're happening again. We're recruiting new players for Squid Game 2.
I rolled my eyes. Right, sure. And I'm supposed to believe that? He smiled again, still too wide, like he knew something I didn't.
Believe what you want, but the train's coming soon, and you have a choice. You can play around with me, or you can walk away. If you win, you get something better than you can imagine. If you lose, well, let's just say the stakes are real now.
A cold shiver ran down my spine. Despite myself, I felt a strange pull, a curiosity that I couldn't shake off. It was ridiculous. It had to be a joke, right? But something about the way he spoke, how serious he seemed, made me pause. What if he was telling the truth? What if there was something more going on? All right, let's play. He handed me the red tile and positioned the blue tile on the bench in front of us. I had seen it done 100 times on the show. All I had to do was flip it. I threw the tile down with a sharp snap. It barely moved the blue tile. The man raised his eyebrows, amused, and took his turn. His tile flipped mine in an instant. He smiled again, wider this time, as if he had expected nothing less.
Looks like I win.
I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. So what now? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small red envelope, just like the ones from the show. He handed it to me without saying a word, and as he did, the train rolled into the station, its brakes screeching as it came to a halt. I looked at the envelope, my heart pounding in my chest. I should have thrown it away. I should have walked onto the train and forgotten the whole thing, but instead, I stuffed it into my pocket and boarded the train, not even looking back at the man. That's how it started. The moment I stepped into my apartment, I ripped open the envelope. Inside was a single card, just like the one from the show. A red circle, triangle, and square stamped in the corner. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. This had to be some kind of weird marketing stunt for Squid Game 2, right? Maybe Netflix had gotten creative, and this was some kind of immersive experience for the fans. But something didn't feel right. I flipped the card over, and there it was. A phone number scrawled in neat black ink. My stomach churned as I stared at it. I knew I shouldn't call, but that same curiosity, that same pull I felt in the subway kept gnawing at me. Before I knew it, I had my phone in my hand and dialed the number. The line rang twice before a voice on the other end answered.
Congratulations! You've been selected to participate in the next game.
I felt my blood run cold. Wait, hold on. What the hell is this? Is this for real? The voice on the other end didn't miss a beat.
You'll receive further instructions soon. Prepare yourself.
The line went dead. I stood there in the middle of my apartment, the phone still pressed to my ear, my heart racing. I couldn't tell if I was more excited or terrified. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, but deep down, I knew this was something else. Something more dangerous. I tossed the phone onto the couch and rubbed my eyes. I needed sleep. Maybe I'd feel different about it in the morning when I could think straight. But sleep didn't come easy that night. I kept thinking about the man, about the card, about what he had said. The games aren't just a show, they're happening again. The next morning, everything felt like a bad dream. The red card, the subway encounter, the cryptic phone call. I was almost convinced it was just my mind playing tricks on me after binge-watching Squid Game 2. But when I reached into my jacket pocket, the card was still there, real and cold in my hand. I stared at it for a long moment, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to throw it away, forget the whole thing. The other part, the one driven by curiosity and a need for answers, couldn't let it go. Something deep inside me wanted to know where this rabbit hole led. I sat down at my kitchen table, my phone in hand, and started researching. If this was some kind of elaborate marketing campaign, surely someone else had posted about it online. I scoured the internet for hours, but nothing came up. No mention of any Squid Game live events or secret games tied to the show's release. Nothing but the usual fan theories and speculation about the upcoming season. But then I found something. A small, barely noticed thread on a dark web forum. It wasn't easy to get to, and I'm still not sure how I stumbled across it. The post was from a user with no profile picture, no details, and it was simple, just a few lines of text.
The recruiter is real. If you've been approached, you're already in. There's no backing out now. The first round is coming soon. Be ready.
My breath caught in my throat. It had to be a prank, some kind of viral stunt, right? But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was something more. My skin crawled as I read the next few replies. One user claimed to have seen someone disappear after receiving the same red card.
Another wrote about strange men in masks following them.
But it was the last reply that chilled me to the bone.
Don't try to run. The more you resist, the worse it gets.
I slammed my laptop shut, my heart racing. What the hell had I gotten myself into? Was this some kind of underground organization? Some real-life version of Squid Game? The more I thought about it, the crazier it seemed. But I couldn't deny what I had seen. The man, the card, the phone call, it all felt too real. And then it got worse. The knock on the door came just after midnight, 3 sharp taps that echoed through my apartment. I froze, the fear rushing back into me. I hadn't been expecting anyone. I hadn't told anyone about the card. I held my breath, listening. Another knock, this time louder. I slowly got up, creeping toward the door. My hand hovered over the doorknob for a moment before I looked through the peephole. No one was there. The hallway was completely empty. My heart pounded as I opened the door, just a crack. And there it was, another red envelope lying on the ground, just like the first one. I picked it up, hands trembling, and tore it open. Inside was a single piece of paper with 2 words printed in bold letters. First round. I blinked at the words, my heart pounding harder with every second that passed. What did they mean? First round of what? My mind immediately jumped to the games in Squid Game, but that was ridiculous, wasn't it? But then I heard it, the soft rustling of footsteps outside my window. I whipped around, my pulse racing as I crept toward the window. Slowly I pulled back the curtain. My stomach dropped. Standing across the street was a man in a black suit and a white mask, just like the guards in the show. He didn't move, didn't even flinch when I spotted him. He just stood there, staring up at my window, like he had been waiting for me. I stumbled back, my chest tightening. This couldn't be happening. I must have been imagining it, right? But when I blinked, he was still there. I quickly closed the curtain and backed away from the window, my mind racing. Was I being watched? Was this some kind of sick game? I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but as soon as I hit call, the screen went black. No signal. I tried again, but nothing happened. My phone was completely dead. I dropped it on the table and collapsed into a chair, my hands shaking. I needed to think, to figure out what was going on. But my thoughts were a jumbled mess. The only thing that made sense was that I was in serious trouble. The man outside had seen me. He knew I was here, and if the games were real, then the first round had just begun. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and fear. Every time I left my apartment, I felt eyes on me, like someone was watching from the shadows, waiting for the right moment. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. But no matter how hard I looked, I never saw anyone, until the day I did. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I had convinced myself that I needed to get out of the apartment, clear my head. I went for a walk in the park near my place, trying to lose myself in the normalcy of everyday life. Kids were playing on the swings, couples were walking their dogs, and the sun was shining. It was a perfect day, the kind that made the fear seem ridiculous. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. But then I saw him again, the man in the mask. He was standing at the edge of the park, just far enough away that I couldn't see his face. But I knew it was him. He was wearing the same suit, the same mask. And this time he wasn't alone. There were 2 others with him, both dressed the same, their white masks gleaming in the sunlight. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. They weren't moving. They were just standing there, watching me. I turned and bolted, running faster than I ever had in my life. I didn't stop until I was back at my apartment, my lungs burning, my legs shaking. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my mind racing. The games were real. The recruiter hadn't been lying, and I was in them now. Before we dive deeper into the madness of the recruiter's twisted game, I want to take a moment to remind you, if you're enjoying this thrilling ride, don't forget to hit that like button. Think of it as your life vest in the turbulent waters of this story. And hey, if you find yourself wanting more terrifying tales like this one, subscribe and join our growing community of horror enthusiasts. Click that bell icon so you're notified every time a new nightmare lands on your screen. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's lurking just around the corner. Days passed, but the tension only grew. The masked figures had vanished, but their presence lingered. I stopped going out, convinced that they were watching, waiting for the next move. Every creak in the floorboards, every gust of wind against the window sent me spiraling deeper into paranoia. That's when the texts started. At first, they were cryptic. A simple number, 001. Then, another, you have 48 hours. I didn't know what it meant, but it became clear quickly. The texts kept coming, each one more cryptic than the last. You have 48 hours. That one sent a chill down my spine. The countdown had begun. But to what? What was I supposed to do in those 48 hours? My mind raced with possibilities. Was it a test? Would someone come for me? Was I supposed to find a way out? I tried calling the number that had sent the messages, but just like before, my phone wouldn't connect. No signal, no service, nothing. It was as if they were controlling everything now, even the technology I relied on. The next day, another message, 001, that number again. Was it referring to the first player? In Squid Game, player 001 had been the elderly man who seemed harmless but turned out to be much more. The connection unsettled me. Was there someone pulling the strings, watching everything unfold? Was this person waiting for me to make my move? I couldn't sit around waiting for whatever was coming. I had to do something, so I did the only thing I could think of. I went to the police. The police station was surprisingly quiet when I arrived. I walked up to the front desk, my palms sweating, trying to keep my voice steady.
I need to report something. It's hard to explain, but I think someone's following me.
The officer behind the desk raised an eyebrow, clearly not impressed.
You think someone's following you?
Yes, I said, my voice trembling. I've been getting these texts, and I was approached by someone who... Before I could finish, another officer walked up. A tall, serious-looking man with a sharp gaze.
What kind of texts are we talking about?
I pulled out my phone and showed him the messages, the cryptic countdown and the number, 001. He stared at them for a moment before handing the phone back to me, his expression unreadable.
You've seen the show, haven't you? Squid Game?
I nodded. Yeah, but this isn't a joke. I think it's real. I think they're trying to...
Let me stop you right there. We get a lot of calls like this. People thinking the show's real, that they're being recruited. It's all just part of the hype. People get carried away.
But I saw them, I protested. The men in the masks. They've been following me. He sighed and gave me a long, hard look, as if he was trying to decide whether I was just another delusional fan or something more. Finally, he nodded toward the door.
We'll look into it. If there's anything suspicious, we'll let you know. But in the meantime, go home, stay safe, and try not to think about it too much. It's just a TV show.
Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. It was too dismissive, too rehearsed, and the way he glanced at his partner when he thought I wasn't looking, it felt off, like they knew more than they were letting on. I left the station, feeling worse than when I'd arrived. But one thing was clear, I couldn't rely on the police. Whatever was happening, I was on my own. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every sound, every creak of the floorboards set me on edge. I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see the masked men standing there, watching. And then at 3 a.m., the phone buzzed again. The game begins tomorrow. Be ready. There was no more time. The countdown was over. I lay there in the dark, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to figure out what to do. I could run, get out of town, disappear. But something told me it wouldn't matter. They would find me, no matter where I went. My phone buzzed again. Look outside. I froze. My fingers clenched around the phone as I slowly sat up, every muscle in my body tense. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see what was waiting for me. But I had no choice. I pulled the curtain back just enough to peer through. There, parked across the street, was a sleek black van. It hadn't been there earlier. The windows were tinted, impossible to see through, and standing next to it was a figure in a black suit and white mask. He was waiting for me. Another text buzzed in. "It's time." I backed away from the window, panic flooding my chest. They were here. They were really here. My mind raced. What could I do? Could I run? Hide? But before I could make a decision, there was another knock at the door. This time it wasn't 3 sharp taps, loud, insistent, echoing through the apartment. Whoever was out there wasn't going to leave until I answered. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move toward the door. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pulled the door open just a crack. Standing in the hallway was the man from the van, his white mask gleaming under the dim hallway light. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. In his hand was another red envelope. He held it out to me and I stared at it, my stomach churning. I knew what it meant. The game was real, and there was no turning back now. With trembling hands, I took the envelope. The man nodded, then turned and walked away, disappearing down the stairs without a word. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the envelope, too afraid to open it. When I finally opened the envelope, my hands shaking, I found a single piece of paper inside. The message was simple. "Second round 10 p.m. tomorrow. You'll be picked up." It was happening. There was no way out. The next day was a blur. I didn't go to work. I didn't leave the apartment. I just sat there, waiting for night to fall, waiting for whatever was coming next. By the time 10 p.m. rolled around, I was a nervous wreck, pacing back and forth, my mind racing with possibilities. I kept telling myself that it wasn't real, that it was all some kind of elaborate prank or marketing stunt. But deep down, I knew the truth. At exactly 10 p.m., I heard the van pull up outside. The sound of the engine sent a wave of dread through me. My phone buzzed one last time. Get in the van. I hesitated for a long moment, my hand hovering over the door handle. But I knew there was no escaping this. I had been chosen, and the game was about to begin. With a deep breath, I opened the door and stepped outside. The van was waiting, its engine idling. The back door slid open, and I saw the figure inside, dressed in black, his mask gleaming in the dim light. I climbed inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The door slid shut behind me and the van pulled away, disappearing into the night. The van was eerily silent, save for the hum of the engine and the occasional bump in the road. I sat in the back, trying to keep my breathing steady, but my chest felt tight like it was about to explode. The masked man sat across from me, his posture unnervingly still, the pale white mask reflecting the dim interior lights. I wanted to ask questions, where we were going, what was about to happen, but the words caught in my throat. It was clear that this wasn't the time for conversation. Whatever game this was, it had already begun the moment I stepped into that van. We drove for what felt like hours, the city lights gradually giving way to darkness as we headed toward the outskirts. I lost track of time, my mind racing with every possible scenario. Were there others? Was I the only one? And what would the second round entail? Finally, the van slowed down and I felt the vehicle turn onto what I assumed was a gravel road. The masked man across from me straightened slightly, signaling that we were close. My pulse quickened. We came to a stop, and without a word, the man opened the door and gestured for me to follow. I stepped out into the cold night air, my breath visible in the dim light. We were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by trees, with a single dilapidated building in the distance. Its windows were dark, like the eyes of a corpse. The man pointed toward the building.
Inside.
I hesitated. The air was thick with tension, but there was no turning back now. I nodded and started walking toward the building, each step feeling heavier than the last. My heart pounded in my ears, and I could feel my hands trembling as I approached the entrance. The door creaked open before I even touched it, and the smell of damp wood and decay hit me like a punch to the gut. The interior was lit by a few flickering bulbs, casting long, sinister shadows along the walls. Inside, a group of people stood in a circle, all wearing masks, some black, some white, like a twisted version of a masquerade ball. At the center of the circle was a table, and on that table, a large metal case. A voice from behind startled me.
Welcome to the second round.
I turned to see a man standing behind me, his face hidden behind a gold mask that was more elaborate than the others. He was clearly in charge, his posture commanding, his voice cold and authoritative.
This is where we separate the strong from the weak. The first round was merely a test of your willingness. Now we will test your resolve.
He gestured to the table.
Inside this case is the key to your survival in this game, but only one of you will make it to the next round.
My heart sank. One of us? My eyes darted to the other participants, each of them standing stiffly, their faces hidden behind their masks. Were they as terrified as I was, or were they more dangerous than they seemed? The man in the gold mask snapped his fingers, and one of the masked participants stepped forward, opening the case with a swift motion. Inside were several small boxes, each labeled with a number.
Take a box, one for each of you.
I felt my legs moving before my brain registered what was happening. One by one, we all approached the table, each of us grabbing a box. The weight of mine felt heavy in my hands, though I couldn't tell if it was because of its actual mass or the fear coursing through my veins. Once we all had our boxes, the man in the gold mask continued.
Inside your box is a tool. It will determine whether you make it through this round or not. You will each be taken to a separate room where you will face a challenge. The details of the challenge will be explained once you open your box. Good luck.
His voice was icy and detached, as if our lives meant nothing to him.
The masked participants began guiding us toward different doors, each leading to a small windowless room.
I was ushered into one at the far end of the hall.
The door closed behind me with a heavy thud, leaving me alone in the dimly lit space. I stared at the box in my hands, my stomach churning with dread. Whatever was inside could be the difference between life and death. With a shaky breath, I opened it. Inside the box was a single object, a pair of scissors. The blades gleamed under the flickering light, sharp and deadly.
A speaker in the corner of the room crackled to life. Your task is simple. You have 10 minutes to cut through the rope hanging from the ceiling. Fail to do so, and the consequences will be unpleasant.
I glanced up, and there it was. A thick rope hanging just above my head, its fibers coarse and knotted. Cutting through it with these scissors would be nearly impossible in the time given.
The speaker crackled again. The clock starts now.
Now that we've peeled back the layers of this chilling experience, it's time to ask, did you think you could handle the truth? If you found yourself on the edge of your seat, make sure to share this video with your friends. After all, misery loves company. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more harrowing tales that will make your heart race and keep you up at night. Click on the playlist in the top left corner to explore more spine-chilling stories. And let's see if you're brave enough to confront what lies in the darkness.